Hello and happy Halloween, agents. Biz here with a special build video. Today we're going to go all twins from The Shining, as we have two different builds featuring the Ridgeways Pride. As always, if you're new to this channel, glad you stopped by. If you like what you see, please like, subscribe, and turn on bell notifications for more Division 2 content. With that said, let's get into it. So for those of you who played Division 1, and like me had a preference to running Predator's Mark, you noticed when we got to DC, there wasn't anything that came shoulder to shoulder with that gear set. Yes, we got Ongoing Directive and Vile later on, but they still only scratched the surface of a build that could do both strong DPS and strong status effects. Enter the Ridgeways Pride. This exotic chest piece is a quest-locked item from the summit. You can get the quest from collecting components and ultimately beating the summit. Once the quest is finished, the Ridgeways Pride will join the general loot pool of exotics. With all that said, let's dive into the stats. This chest piece comes with all red attributes. You get a red core weapon damage attribute, and then a critical hit chance and damage attribute. It is a chest piece, so you also get a mod slot of your choosing. The exotic talent is called Bleeding Edge, and its talent bleeds any enemy you shoot within 15 meters. This talent also grants a percentage of armor regen for every enemy that's bleeding within those 15 meters, starting at 3% for one enemy, and goes all the way up to 48 for 5 enemies. So clearly this piece has two sides of the build coin. One side being an offensive monster, causing bleed to whoever gets in the way. The other side, you have a blood god who can't be killed if enough people are bleeding. Somewhere, I think Blade is having an existential crisis. Let's go over the armor regen build first. This build will be all about maximum blood, and that blood coming back to you and keeping you alive. Kinda creepy, but let's check it out. Ridgeway's Pride aside, there are a couple ways you can build this tank, and I went back and forth on which one I wanted to show. Ultimately, I went with the one less traveled, but if you need a better look at a true Patriot PvP meta, it will be available on the Rapture Gaming Discord's Division Build Lab at discord.gg/rapturegaming. So this build is a 12 red, 6 blue, 0 yellow attribute build. We went with 2-piece Bellstone Armory for a little extra armor regen, along with some extra armor on kill. As you can also see, my blue attributes are focused mainly on amount of armor regen to take advantage of Bleeding Edge from Ridgeway's Pride. For my other 3 pieces, I went with Sokolov for a jump in SMG damage. Really, any one-piece weapon damage talent will help, just as long as you're not an idiot using shotgun damage from Badger Tough when you have dual LMGs. Please, don't do that. I also went with a Gila Guard piece for an extra bonus to my base armor. Again, this build needs armor in the most efficient ways possible, so you can maximize damage as well. 5% on a one piece is very useful. Finally, I went with a Grupo Sombra backpack. The extra critical hit damage comes in handy, but more importantly is the backpack talent. Whatever combination of this build you decide to run, you must run Creeping Death on the backpack. Creeping Death allows you to spread a status effect to anyone in a 5-meter radius. Meaning, if you bleed one person in a group with Ridgeways, you'll bleed many more. Many more bleeders equals maximum blood god immortality. As for guns, you really can use anything you're comfortable with, as long as they have Sadist on them. For anyone that isn't familiar, Sadist adds 20% damage to targets that are bleeding. As this build has more blues than a normal DPS build, that extra 20% damage will help immensely. For the sake of transparency, I went with an MB5 ST as my main damage gun, and I went with the Mop for extra armor on kill should things get a little dicey. So this build is very viable in Dark Zone PvP right now. Having one of these builds in a 4-man team can add an edge and build diversity that could leave other teams scratching their heads trying to figure out a counter. Heed the warning though, of one of these builds in a group, as the regen is reliant on you getting the bleed to an enemy. If you have 2 or more people trying to get the bleed, someone will be left out to dry. On the other side of the coin, the offensive monster is a perfect wombo combo of status effect and DPS. Let's take a look under the hood of this death dealer. So besides the Ridgeways Pride, on this build I have a 13 red, 0 blue, and 3 yellow attributes. I'm running a Golden Gear Mask for the 10% status effect, 2 Peace Walker Harris for the weapon and armor damage, and 2 pieces of the Eclipse Protocol for the 15% status effect. I also had to sacrifice 2 attribute slots on my knee pads and gloves for status effect. It's important for this build that you run the Eclipse backpack. As it is working as intended, the backpack has a talent that amplifies all damage you deal to status affected enemies by 30%. Very nice. As for the guns, like the previous build, you can use really whatever you find comfortable. Personally, I like SMGs and shotguns right now, so I went with a tactical Vector and an ACS-12. For this build to work, you do still need to run Sadist as the weapon talent. It was critical in the first build, it's still critical now. So doing all the blood math, when you get the bleed, you're dealing close to 1.2 million bleed on NPCs, and adding 20% damage and 30% amplified damage to your enemies as well. That's a maximum exsanguination. As for skills, I keep a Revive Hive on me, and I also run a Banshee Pulse for maximum spooky vibes. So this build, unlike the armor regen, almost completely ignores the armor regen portion of the Ridgeway's talent. The idea with this build is that we've leaned enough into the bleed and status effect amplified damage that you kill your enemy first. I haven't tried this one out in PvP, but it is highly serviceable in PvE and in group play, as stacking armor regen isn't a major part of this build. And that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, again, make sure you like and subscribe. We have new content at least every couple weeks. Also, if you're struggling to find people to game with, check out Rapture Gaming at discord.gg/RaptureGaming. We raid, we PvP, we have a good time on this and other AAA games. Have a happy Halloween, don't eat too much candy. Biz out.